Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Peterson. I'm the Executive Director for the John and Janice Wyatt Foundation, and I want to thank you all for attending or listening into this virtual presentation. The focus of this presentation is to talk a little bit about the biology behind the growth of us as humans, but more importantly, to look at the nature or the environmental impacts of what happens with our children during this critical brain growth and body development during the first 5 years, and how that impacts our future success and outcomes as adults, and then thus the impacts of that on our workforce and the societal costs at large. So to do that, we're going to talk very briefly about my why, and then do a quick touch on our high school biology review, and then more importantly, talk about what happens during those first few years in terms of environmental inputs and how that can either positively or negatively impact our life outcomes and chances for success downrange. What those impacts are, both to us in the workforce as well as societal costs, and what we can do to help prevent some of these concerns down the road. And then by doing that, ultimately, what I really would like to get at is the importance of investing in our early childhood education system, and what the strategies for creating a better outcome for our kids and ultimately for our community in Dorchester County. So the first thing I really want to get to is, why is this important? And I'm just going to very briefly touch on this picture. As you can see here, you see a woman that looks like she's most likely in poverty, with a child. And this ultimately can be symbolic or representative of what the cycle of generational poverty looks like, whereby we see a mother who was likely born into poverty, grew up in poverty, and then had this child in poverty. And you see what's happening with his children. There's not a lot of resources available for this child. The mother clearly has all that she can is being given to this child. But unfortunately, what will more likely happen than not, based on statistics, is this child will grow up in poverty, have his or her own children, and that cycle will continue. The purpose of this presentation and all of these strategies to improve our communities is to break this cycle, because ultimately this belies or misrepresents what the American dream is supposed to be, which is we shouldn't be forced into a future outcome based on the zip code we're born in or the circumstances in which we're born. So we want to really change this narrative and change this trajectory. So in order to do that, we're looking at two different areas about human development. First is getting back to our high school biology and looking at how are people born. And what we know is a mother and a father, when they have a child, they both invest 50% of their DNA into that child. The DNA, we have chromosomes within our cells. The DNA makes up our chromosomes. Within the DNA strand, we have portions of DNA called genes. And those genes are the blueprint for the way our children are going to be born. They are the building blocks. And so we can't escape our DNA and our genes or our parents. We are going to be born within certain constraints based on the expression of those genes. However, and this is what's really important, is there's a lot of spectrum or a lot of flexibility within those genes to either positively or negatively impact how our children are going to ultimately develop, both emotionally, socially, and physically, in fact. And so both our nature and our nurture really matters. And where we have the opportunity to make positive change and impact is in the environmental inputs that we provide to our children. So, and when we do that is important throughout the lifespan, of course. However, what's most important are those first 5 years. And that's because of the way our bodies and brains develop. And the next slide, I'm going to share with you a video. It's about a little over a minute long, that really, I think, does a really a wonderful job of really sharing how our brains develop as children.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
So we learn the first 5 years are really critical to our brain development. And we see that in this slide here, where we look at what we call brain plasticity, which is the ability of our brain to take on these new neural connections, what we call brain myelination, or the synaptic architectural growth of the brain. And we see that the greatest during those first 5 years. Why? Because that's when our brain is growing the most. We know that 95% of our physical brain mass grows during those first 5 years. And so it makes sense that that is the time where we have the greatest opportunity to make positive, or as a counterfactual, negative impacts on the brain, whether it's brain growth and neural connections, or it's the brain pruning, where we actually inhibit brain growth. And what we see is those first 5 years, we have the greatest opportunity to make those course corrections. That does not mean over the lifetime that we can't do that, but it does require more physiological energy in order to make those changes over time. So if we have positive interventions, we can take that opportunity for brain plasticity and really grow the neural connections of our brain. On the opposite, if we provide constant, consistent toxic stress to our children's brains, that actually creates the pruning or inhibiting of our brain growth. And so what is toxic stress? Well, it really means it can be a variety of things, of negative inputs into a child's brain. And that can result from chronic or consistent physical or emotional abuse, all the way down to isolation. So we ignore our children, we're not connected to them, they're physically or emotionally isolated. Those are ways that we actually can inhibit the developing a portion of our brain, which has impacts proximally, but it also has impacts long term. And we're going to talk about some of the societal costs down the road. But at this portion of the presentation, just keep in mind that our cells actually create some level of cellular memory. And so when toxic stress occurs in constant high-level doses during those first 5 years, cells actually remember that. And down the road, years later, we see those negative memories present themselves as chronic non-communicable disease, which has huge medical costs associated with it, never mind how it's impacting our adults at that point. But we'll talk about why that's so important in a little bit. We also look at the actual development of the brain. So when these synaptic connections are happening, it actually creates growth in gray matter. So based on income and poverty, we can see significant changes over a lifetime in terms of the size of our brains based on inhibited or enhanced neural connections over the course of a life. So everybody roughly birth to 5, you'll see starts out generally the same, but as results of poverty, we can actually see significant growth in the physical brain matter over time, where you see the green being high social economic status and the blue line at the bottom being low socioeconomic status, or what we consider adults in poverty. So again, kind of to summarize, what does it all mean? It means we are, as a human, as we grow up, a combination, a Venn diagram of both our genes and our environment. They're both important, but where we as a community can make change and help break the cycle of poverty is by focusing on what we can change, and that is by focusing on the environment or the nurture, how we engage and interact with our kids as they're growing. We talk a lot about poverty being a lot of some of the root causes of the challenges that we see from this generational cycle. Well, starting from the beginning, I'm going to walk you through very quickly a map from left to right, top to bottom, on how some of this plays out. So early on, we talked about a little bit about isolation or lack of literacy in our families that are living in poverty. You can see some of the big statistics here. 30 million less words are heard by our low-income children by the time they turn 3 years old. More than half of our low-income children have no books in the home, and significantly more of our low-income preschools and after-school and summer programs have no books. And so there's not opportunities to increase literacy interactions in our preschools and in our after-school and summer programs unless we can make some of those changes. A lot of our low-income families, because of lack of health insurance, unstable, unsafe housing, poor diet, we see significant number of developmental delays identified, and that causes downrange academic and social emotional learning challenges. Our low-income families are also more likely to be chronically absent for a variety of reasons. And what we see at this point, by the time they're entering public school, a lot of our low-income children are already at least 1, maybe 2 years behind their peers by the time they hit kindergarten. That 1 year behind is also inclusive of one good quality year of Worcester County Public Schools, public pre-K. So if our kids are not engaging in any sort of positive academic, social, emotional, nurturing environment during those first 3 years, even with a high quality 1 year pre-K, we do see many children already behind still by a year when they hit kindergarten. Those kids are also, by the time they reach third grade, we'll see typically 2 or 3 years behind their peers due to not only what's happening during the first 5 years, but also as a result of what we call summer slide or lack of summer opportunities or after school opportunities during those first few years of elementary school. And so here we get to the big inflection point where we now move to the bottom left of this chart, and that is having our kids on grade level reading by third grade. There are very strong data points associated with kids that are reaching third grade not on grade level reading. They are much more likely to not graduate high school on time. They're much more likely to be chronically absent. They're much more likely to drop out of school, significantly so. To the point where, with the Annie E. Casey Foundation results from their studies over the last 2 decades, we've really learned that it is absolutely critical that we get our kids on grade level reading by third grade because of what happens downrange, what we see downstream as a result of kids that are not at this point. And as you just saw with the previous square data point, a lot of our kids that are not on grade level reading by third grade are also our children that are not kindergarten ready. Again, really emphasizing what happens during those first 5 years and how critical that is to downrange success. So moving forward, our kids that are not on grade level reading by third grade, they're 13 times more likely to drop out. They're 7 times more likely to drop out if they're chronically absent over the period of time after third grade. They're not eligible for 90% of the current jobs in the market today if they drop out of high school. And we know there are a significant number of children dropping out every year in the millions. And then DCPS, if you look at DCPS dropout rates across the district, the last numbers I saw were 14%, but for our kids in poverty, it's almost double that. Why is dropping out important to be aware of? Because most of the crime committed in the U.S., to the point of 3/4 of all crime, are committed by high school dropouts. And being in court involved or being incarcerated is very closely tied to dropping out. So if we keep our kids from dropping out, if we can get them to graduate high school on time, They're less likely to be involved in the criminal justice system, more likely to be active, engaged citizens moving forward with a career or a job. We also know the disconnect that there are significant numbers of vacancies in the United States and as well as in Dorchester County. And we also know that we have fairly high unemployment numbers still. And there's a disconnect between unemployment and jobs available. And a lot of that also can come back to not having the right skills to be in the workforce, which means not being successful through their public school lifetime. So how do we start to make this change? Well, let's look at the theory of change. This is going to basically also more simplistically walk us back from that last chart. And what we call the ladder of success is based on going from early on the first 5 years to our life outcomes. So at the end of the day, we want to have successful children. We want our children to grow up to be successful adults. In order to be successful adults, what we really need to make sure is that they're college or career ready. They don't have to always go to a 2-year or 4-year university. They can go into the trades. They can go into other areas in the workforce, but they need a living wage job in order to not have to make those tough choices between having health care, what type of house or apartment they're going to be living in, what types of healthy foods we're going to be feeding our children. So in order to do that, they need to come out of high school, college, and or career ready. They need to have a pathway for the future. To get there, our children need to graduate high school on time. It's a huge predictor. If we can keep them from dropping out and get them to graduate high school on time, their chances of success are significantly higher. For our kids to graduate high school on time, they need to be connected to school, which means they need to be attending school regularly, and they need to be on grade level reading by 3rd grade. In order for them to get there, they need to be kindergarten ready, which means we have to address poverty during those first 5 years and making sure our kids are getting those positive interventions and not the negative toxic stress interventions that could be negatively impacting this entire success ladder. Looking at some of the societal costs, we know poverty in the United States, around the country, costs over almost $1 trillion a year. And our high school dropouts alone cost the U.S. economy almost $2 billion in lost tax revenue, plus $300,000 per dropout over the course of a lifetime in expenses, many related to prison costs and requirements for the social safety net or social services. Cost of prisons are extremely expensive. We spend billions of dollars on federal prisons alone. That $43 billion in the slide is not inclusive of private or state prisons, and is also taking away taxpayer revenue that could be brought back into the economy. I mentioned earlier in the presentation about toxic stress and the long-term impacts on chronic disease. So as many of those children, there's direct connectivity between children and toxic stress and adult chronic illness, to the point where, as you can see here, we've got about $600 billion that we spend annually into some of our major chronic illnesses, which is heart disease, diabetes, and mental health. And a lot of those major diseases are directly associated with early childhood toxic stress. If we can remove a lot of that stress and create better environments for our children, birth to 5, we have the opportunity to significantly lower the cost of healthcare, as well as the negative impacts of what these poor health conditions are doing to the adults that are trying to engage the workforce or to be parents themselves. What does all of this mean in terms of business return on investment? Just looking at this investment slide, what the ROI is, you can see it's very important to invest in job training. It's very important to invest in K-12 education. But where we see the highest return on investment is those first 5 years. And if you, I'm just for fun, overlay the brain plasticity slide, you'd see almost an identical chart where the brain plasticity and early childhood, birth to 5, we have the greatest opportunity with our brain architecture to make change. And that makes a lot of sense. It's intuitive that we also invest the most funds and the most resources into early childhood. We can change that trajectory as quickly as possible. Looking at the return on investment overall, I mentioned the importance of pre-K and that you can make some changes and course corrections children that had no access to any activities birth to 3, we can make improvements in the pre-K space. So DCPS pre-K 4, very, very important. And you can see it's got a 7 to 10% ROI, which is great. It makes a huge difference in the outcomes of our kids as they enter kindergarten and public school. However, if we also focus highly on the prenatal care of our mothers, as well as the birth to 3, we can make even greater ROI at 13% by looking at the whole picture birth to 5. Looking at earning potential, we see high earning potential. Again, very intuitive. Looking at advanced degrees is the highest. In purple, you see brown next, which is bachelor's degrees. I would also argue a lot of our trades can come in at the same earning potential. And then the mean is in the pink dashed line, and then high school graduates and dropouts, so you start to see drop off in potential. So if we want to create higher earning potential for our kids as they grow up, we need them to graduate high school in time and have a college or career track. Moving forward, how do we solve this? We need as a community to invest in 4 major areas. We need healthy children. We need to be intentional about the learning and care of our children emotionally, physically, academically, with age-appropriate nurturing behavior and interactions. And we need to also not forget there's opportunities for reducing some of these previous learning losses and closing achievement and opportunity gaps by focusing on after school and summer opportunities after our kids reach kindergarten. A lot of ideas listed here, individual strategies that we're trying to bring together, braid together, ultimately to create an aligned, singular vision on how do we improve the outcomes of our children. But really, a lot of those strategies are centered around engaging our kids birth to 5, looking at after school and summer programming, and making sure our kids are actually going to school, not chronically absent, and are participating and connected. And when we take all of those and start to braid those together, we can create a strategy map that takes the poverty marker, bold on the left, 1 grade, 3rd grade level reading in the middle, and then life success. And in pink, you can look at all of the negative outcomes that are generated by poverty: lack of books in the home, lack of opportunity for early child care education, poor health outcomes, increased toxic stress, lack of summer and after school opportunities. That creates a lack of opportunity to be ready for kindergarten. When we're not ready for kindergarten, we start to see disconnect from school, so higher chronic absenteeism rates. Kids are not 1 grade level reading by 3rd grade. That creates further disconnect, further chronic absenteeism. We start to see kids drop out more often, lower on-time graduation rates, kids that aren't ready for college and career, and ultimately are having negative life outcomes. The way that we look to address that through improved attendance strategies, improved opportunities for after school and summer, and getting more literacy interventions in those programs, and having a strong birth to 5 strategy, we can change that trajectory. And you see those in blue: improved on grade 3rd grade level reading, improved on-time graduation rates, and thus improved college and career track and better opportunities for life success. That is the strategy that we are looking at in Dorchester County as a way to break that cycle of generational poverty. More granularly and concrete strategies, here's a list of some of the opportunities that we're looking at as part of the campaign for grade level reading. What this does, looking from left to right, is we are stacking programs to give kids and families as many opportunities of layered positive interactions as possible from the time they're born, even prenatally, and bridging the 3rd grade boundary through kindergarten success all the way up to 3rd grade reading. So from birth through elementary school, layered, stacked, connected, aligned programming around those 3 key areas of school readiness, after school and summer, and attendance. And thus, if we can work through those, we can make that positive change at that inflection point and create and make sure more of our kids are graduating on time, staying in school, and getting greater jobs and having more opportunities to be in the workforce down the road. Last slide: what can our businesses do? A couple of things, and I'm going to do this from an internal and external perspective. Internally, look within your business. Are there policies and benefits that I can adjust to make it more family friendly? Can I engage our employees in ways that we say, I'm going to give you paid time off to go volunteer with a nonprofit of your choice that's working towards some of these solutions. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's a week, but offer them the opportunity to get out in the community, volunteer. It's good for business, it's good for our nonprofits, and it's good for employee retention and pride. Support our families and provide assistance to parents. If there's opportunities to offer them healthcare insurance, if there are other ways to give our parents more resources, less obstacles to be better parents, to be able to engage their children more, to be able to get their children into programs where they can benefit, and act as a conduit of information. If it's something as simple as having a bulletin board with resources for our families, maybe there's activities that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is putting on. There's other community nonprofit activities that are supporting healthy families, reading circles, Dolly Parton Imagination Library. If there's a way to use the business to make sure our families are aware of all that's out there, because there is a lot out there, that's another great way to get that information to our families, to increase uptake of all of the things that our community is already trying to do or are looking to do in the future. Externally, how do we support these efforts outside of the business of your employees? You can offer political capital by supporting legislation, getting the biggest businesses or all businesses together and say, we collectively want to weigh in on an issue that's important to us. Maybe it's within a city council, maybe it's county council, maybe we want improved access to the library, we want more resources, we want this, we want that, or there are programs at the state that we believe our weight can have influence through the chamber. Let's work towards that. We can look at giving money to nonprofits that are doing the good work on the ground, that are proximal to our most challenging issues. And that can be through marketing dollars, by sponsoring events and fundraisers that provide expense offsets for the events they're putting on and add unrestricted revenue to the nonprofits trying to do this work. Or we could align giving through what we call corporate social responsibility dollars. So giving money directly into a program that really aligns with your company or business philosophy. Lastly, if you're a business that can't provide cash to an organization, if you've got gifts in kind or GIK that could be supportive of a business, maybe, or of a nonprofit, maybe it's offering space, maybe it's offering free meals, maybe it's offering gift cards. If there are ways that you can access some of your talent through IT support, helping with a database or a website, all of those things can be very beneficial to a nonprofit and cut down on a lot of the expenses that they would have to undertake otherwise. So it's not giving cash, but it's offsetting an expense that they would be required to take otherwise. Those are all ways that our businesses can come together and support the great work that this community, from the public sector and the private sector, are all doing under a shared umbrella of a shared vision with a shared set of metrics that we believe we can make this positive change if we all work together, invest wisely, and invest deeply and richly into our community. We can make the change that we're looking for. And in fact, in many ways, looking at some of these data points, we are already making progress in certain areas. And so it is an optimistic message, and one in which I think our community should and can rally around for the betterment of all of us, but also just strictly from a business perspective, this is a way that we can really make positive change in Dorchester County. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I have my contact information up here, always happy to share, but want to thank you for all that you're already doing and how you're already engaged, and look forward to hopefully working with many of you in the future. So thank you very much.